Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven. I am your host. And joining me, as always, is my guy, Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How are you doing today?
Doing pretty well. I'm very, very close to a week off, but then a week after that is my EdTPA credential stuff. So, it's a nice break, calm before the storm. Then the storm hits, and then we'll be okay.
Yeah, obviously, I work in school. I work as a counselor. You're getting your master's in teaching credential. My wife has her teacher's credential. So, I know what that EdTPA is like, and I do not envy you at all for, having to balance all these things around. The EdTPA is no joke.
Yeah, my reward is I get a job and then I have to pay off debt. But, it'll be fun.
The hoops you have to jump through to work in education, make no sense to me. But it is what it is. That's the chosen profession.
Yeah, exactly.
So, gonna have a fun conversation today. Nothing groundbreaking to talk about. Obviously, we'll revisit some of the Super Bowl takeaways. The whole thing, obviously, kind of theming the offseason, if you will, is going to be how do the Chargers kind of make up this ground to catch the Kansas City Chiefs coming off of this Super Bowl win, their second in 5 years, their third trip, obviously. Travis Kelce at the parade today, calling it a dynasty and all this stuff. So, I think the whole offseason, right, is going to be framed around like how do the Chargers take that next step, and we'll have some conversations about that. And then we're also going to take some stock of where the Chargers' previous draft classes are. So we're going to have a conversation about each of the rookies from this past class and the sophomores, if you will, from 2021. I'm definitely a guy that I like to take stock of what do you have before you can talk about what are you able to get in the future in terms of the draft class. So we'll have that conversation. And then obviously the Chargers did hire a quarterbacks coach, Mr. Doug Nussmeier. So that's where we're gonna start today. Before we get there, obviously, if you are watching this, please take a moment and like this video, subscribe to the channel. If you are listening to this, please make sure and leave us a rating or review. All these things really help us grow the channel, and we've got some big goals for this year, so we would appreciate all of the positive feedback possible. That being said, we'll hit on the Chargers quarterbacks coach first. Doug Nussmeier obviously coached with Kellen Moore in Dallas. I think this was kind of the no-brainer connection from the jump. He coached tight ends also in Dallas before when Kellen Moore was the quarterbacks coach. He's been an offensive coordinator at several different college teams throughout his career, and did play in the NFL as well as the CFL, back in the day. So, Tyler, your initial thoughts here as the Chargers kind of revamp the brain trust around Justin Herbert officially with Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier.
It's kind of like the Kellen Moore signing, if you will, because I thought the Chargers were going to go any other direction. And then suddenly I was bracing for a hire that I wasn't super thrilled about.
Yeah.
And they end up with Kellen Moore, which is great. So with the Chargers and the QB coach, it's a very, very important hire because that is potentially your coordinator next year. Yeah, I was like, okay, what are they going to do? It makes sense. I figured they would go with Gerard Johnson or Nussmeier, or maybe like internally Tom Arth, which I wouldn't have loved, but I almost felt like they were preparing for that at some point last year. So when the news broke that they were interviewing Fred Walker, who was Daniel Jones' coach in college, and then Derek Carr worked with Derek Carr recently, who just got released by the Raiders. It's not the most inspiring thing. Granted, again, it is just a quarterback's coach, but a guy with 1 year in the league, as an assistant with a quarterback who wasn't like amazing last year by any means, doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. But for them to turn around and go get Nussmeier, it feels really great. And I believe it was Staley or Telesco, whoever, when they got hired, was talking about alignment. And I just think that if you're trying to do so much in year one with this new offense, another freaking offense, like you're perfectly aligned from, I think, Staley's division, but then of course, definitely from the offensive coordinator to the quarterback's coach. And if Kellen Moore does leave, you understand each other perfectly. You know exactly how to have that succession plan in place. This is a really, really good hire for the Chargers. Again, I don't know if it'll work out, but the process of getting a very good offensive coordinator on the market who has a quarterback's coach he has a relationship with, that process is fantastic. So to me, this has been a slam dunk 2 moves for them so far.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one. I think, you mentioning alignment is perfect because I think that was really something that was lacking, the previous 2 years with Joe Lombardi and Shane Day. And not that they get all of the blame, right? But I think that's part of the reason why Joe Lombardi would always, fall back on what he was comfortable with, because that was, he wasn't super comfortable with like the Shanahan stuff that Brandon Staley wanted to be running. And that's, you have Shane Day and you have Kevin Koger and you have all these guys who have been in that Shanahan for McVay system. And so I think it just kind of put a roof essentially on what Joe Lombardi was comfortable running. And I think that showed with just the lack of adaptability from week to week and within each game. So, getting these two back together, I think just does, I think it's, it checks that box, right? Like I think you have somebody who's experienced, you have somebody who has that relationship with Kellen Moore. And I think it's really important also that, both of these guys played in the NFL. I think that was something that was lacking around Justin Herbert with Joe Lombardi and Shane Day. Not to say that that's like, it makes you a better coach because you played in the NFL, but, these two guys have been there and done that, and they're able to, really kind of use that experience to their advantage. And, I reached out to a couple people, podcasters and a reporter in Dallas, and they said that Doug actually did a really good job with the tight ends when he was the tight ends coach.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Just somebody that is really able to, break things down from a technique standpoint, from a film standpoint, really helping players with their preparation because he's been there and done that, in the NFL himself. So I think if you are concerned about him being the offensive coordinator down the road, I would understand that. His coordinating experience in college wasn't exactly super inspiring. If you go back and look at the Florida ranks or the Michigan ranks and things like that, it didn't end well. And I think that's why he kind of bounced around a little bit. But it is possible to be a really good position coach and not be a very good coordinator. And I think Pep Hamilton is another case of that being true.
Yeah.
So I think Doug is a really, quality position coach. And I think him and Kellen Moore just being able to be on the same page for Justin and be able to build this offense the way that they want to run it, I think it is huge for the next, year and potentially beyond. We'll see what happens with Kellen Moore, obviously.
Yeah, no, very excited for this one for sure.
So I will also say, I think this pretty much guarantees that Cooper Rush is probably going to be the backup this year.
Oh, absolutely. I think it has to be at that point. I can't think of who was the Cowboys backup last year. Was it also Cooper Rush like the previous
It was
year?
Andy Dalton the year before that.
Okay. We'll see. But yeah, Cooper Rush feels like one, unless someone wants to go make him a starter or something.
Yeah, which would be a surprise. So all in all, I think this is a good hiring, and that continuity is huge. So all right, we'll move on here. We're going to talk about the Super Bowl. Obviously the Chiefs, coming out victorious over the Eagles. That game was crazy. I hate the way that it ended, but it was a fantastic game. Obviously, the Chiefs being able to get that victory, really kind of solidifies where they're at. I mean, this was supposed to be their rebuilding year. This is supposed to be their transition year. And I think Travis Kelce saying that like nobody picked them to make the playoffs is kind of ridiculous, but players love making up those narratives. So I think people generally, viewed them as a playoff team, but this was not supposed to be the way that their season ended this year after trading Tyreek Hill. And, they have like 7 rookies playing key roles on defense. Like this was supposed to be, a relatively step back for them. And ultimately it ends up with them winning the Super Bowl. So, this conversation, we'll see where this exactly goes, but inspired by your tweet about it. And then also some conversations in our Discord chat. Everyone's going to be chasing the Chiefs now. And obviously the AFC is pretty loaded. If you're Tom Telesco and Brandon Staley, what's kind of like your point of emphasis this offseason as you do try and catch the Chiefs and be able to make up that ground?
Offense, to be completely honest. Of course, if I'm mock drafting and before, if I'm trying to draft to build the best team, the Chargers need an edge rusher. The Chargers need another pass rushing defensive tackle. I'm not saying that the Eagles defense was fantastic. I'm not saying that they had like the greatest, shutdown defense of all time, but they had one heck of a defensive front, and the Chiefs just kind of walked all over them. And you needed 40 points to go win that game. And typically against the Chiefs, as we've seen, like you need 30 plus. I mean, the Chargers scored 27. The last time they met, they lost. At this point, and especially with the new coordinator, with Herbert and all this, like your point of emphasis is now offense. Some guys are best player available. If someone fantastic drops to 21 and they're a defender, I get it. But overall, especially looking at just all 7 picks, not just the first round pick, you have to focus on offense because you got to score 35 and go into every game against the Chiefs thinking you need at least 5 touchdowns. So my emphasis is really in general, offense.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how the Chargers approach that particular debate because, like in the draft, I think from a class perspective, like I want an edge rusher in the first round because I think that's where the value is. I think this is a stacked pass
Yep.
rushing class, and you can have there's a variety of edge rushers that'll be on the board at 21 who I think are ultimately better prospects than the receivers, than the tight ends, than the running backs. Although maybe not Bijan Robinson, but I think this pass rushing class is stacked. I mean, there could certainly be a group, that there's a run before the Chargers pick that, and that could change some things. But from a class perspective right now, I think the value would be at edge rusher for the Chargers at 21. But like you're saying, there's this debate, and I'm sure it's probably a debate that was happening when AFC East teams were trying to catch the Patriots. Like, well, do we load up on defense? Do we load up on offense? Like, how do we go about doing this? And obviously the Chargers in 2020, after the Chiefs had won the 2019 Super Bowl, they went Herbert and then they went Kenneth Murray, and they figured that Kenneth Murray was kind of that missing piece on defense, so to speak, to make Gus Bradley's defense be working at a higher level to catch the Chiefs. Obviously that didn't work out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just in general, if they're looking at the draft overall, easier said than done, but I do hope they look for more of these higher floor players. Like I might go to the mock drafts that we do and not take everyone's highest prospect, like because they have such a high ceiling. For the Chargers, if it's defense, if it's offense, like it might just be the guy who can contribute the most. Like not guaranteed, but I feel like that floor is very high. You can chase the ceiling maybe. And I guess with this offensive coordinator and with Herbert, like I suppose chasing the ceiling is okay. And I feel like guys on defense have developed, or free agents have come in, had career years. But you look at what the Chiefs did. Part of the reason I was so enamored with their draft, and we all unanimously agreed it was the best draft in the AFC West by a good margin, I think.
Yeah.
Of course, they did have more picks early on, so that kind of helps. But still, overall, like the one thing that really benefited them so much, which I think made it a great draft, and sort of why we did this last offseason and this offseason, was the composite score rankings, which looks at the guys who are the best, play by play. Maybe they didn't get all the reps in the world, but they are high floor guys because in the reps that they had, they were the best play-to-play players. And you look at someone like McDuffie was 5th, Karlaftis was 7th. I think Brian Cook was 1st. I think Kennard was like 2nd. Sky Moore was 3rd. And again, I'm not saying these guys all went and had career seasons, and are making the Pro Bowl and All Pro, but like you take these guys, or like a Trey Smith the previous year, or a Creed Humphrey, like these guys, the numbers that they put up on a pro play basis are so good. I feel like the Chargers need to lean towards that rather than someone like, no offense, but like JT Woods, who was a little bit further down in the percentile of safeties. Isaiah Spiller, I think, was like 12th out of the 25 running backs we had. Again, that's 3rd and 4th round picks, so you're not getting the best guys all the time. But aiming for guys like that would be fantastic.
Yeah, that's Tom Telesco's draft strategy is strange. Because in the first round, it's like they definitely value like high production at high quality programs. I mean, you're talking about a Big Ten offensive lineman for Staley's first draft in Rashawn Slater, and an ACC offensive lineman, and then obviously you're talking about Justin Herbert and all these guys who have produced at high level college football programs. And they also do that in the later rounds too. Like, I mean, Staley drafted Jamari Sawyer and Mark Webb because these are these guys who played a lot of football for these good programs. But then in the 2nd and 3rd round, it's like, well, we're going to take these projects from Baylor and from Tennessee, and no shade to those programs, but
sure.
I think this draft in particular, Telesco needs to take the safer players, because at this point, like the Chargers have their star players, and I don't think they need to hit like home runs, but they just need these guys to come in and fortify some depth and be able to be quality football players. And I think you aim for those lower floor player or lower ceiling, higher floor players, because you know what you're going to get out of them. Maybe they're not going to turn into a true like Pro Bowl player, but if they're just a quality veteran that can stick around for 5-6 years in Los Angeles, then I think that's a win for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and they don't even keep these guys after they draft them. So like you're developing projects to end up letting them go,
right?
Unless you're a 1st round pick, which is very frustrating. So someone like Trey Pipkins was not a great pick really, but then he developed, but then he might be gone. And so you've gotten, what, 12 high quality games out of your pick in the 4th year of his contract. Like, the Chargers can't do that. Tom Telesco's, well, God, we assume is going to be fired before the next project that he picks, this year, maybe even last year with JT Woods, can officially get onto the field and be the starter that they want. So not that you only take the high floor guys, but like, I'm going to try to look for guys that are just a bit more high floor. You just know enough, and these guys can step in. And if the Chargers lose someone, it's not, oh gosh, like we're going from edge rusher or a safety or whatever to, I guess we'll take the undrafted free agent Raheem Lane because the
Right.
3rd round pick isn't ready yet. No, like, you want to have someone in between. Not that undrafted free agents can't stand out, but I'm looking for guys that can just be that fill in or obviously start for the Chargers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good conversation. Circling back to like the offense versus defense conversation, Marcus Mosher, who works for PFF and Locked On, he's the host of Locked On Cowboys. He tweeted this out and said the points per game rank among the last 7 Super Bowl winners: 2022 Chiefs number 1, 2021 Rams number 7, 2020 Buccaneers number 3, 2019 Chiefs number 4, 2018 Patriots number 4, 2017 Eagles number 3, 2016 Patriots number 2. So every single team except for the Rams had a top 5 offense in points per game, and the Rams obviously had a ton of talent on that team. On the opposite side, in terms of defensive points per game allowed, 2022 Chiefs 16th, 2021 Rams 15th, 2020 Bucks 8th, 2019 Chiefs 7th, 2018 Patriots 7th, 2017 Eagles 4th, 2016 Patriots 9th. So the league is definitely trending more towards offense, and I think it's really starting to, pan out in Super Bowls. I think, like, obviously you have to have a good defense. Like, nobody's saying that defense doesn't matter anymore, but the whole adage of like defense wins championships seems to have kind of gone out the window these days.
Yeah, I mean, not that you should follow the Chiefs model in general for how they do defense, because I don't think it's always been the best, but they just go get guys who can go get after the football, and that's kind of it. Or take away the football. I don't even know if it seems like Spags did a really good job in the second half of the season, but like overall, I feel like their defense has never really been like elite, but they always know, like, their identity is tied perfectly to what they want to do on offense.
Yeah, and I think that identity is crucial. And I think if you're looking at the Chiefs as kind of a model, like, they're able to get these guys and use them in very particular ways. And like, you see all of the jet sweep stuff, all the jet motion with Kadarius Toney, that change of direction, like, that's his thing. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, like, his thing is the go balls, the post routes, things like that. All of these other players on their team really are able to kind of, accentuate what they have in Travis Kelce and to a certain extent Juju Smith-Schuster. And I think that's something that the Chargers have kind of been lacking a little bit too. They have their 2 guys, Keenan and Mike, but then, they're trying to draft Josh Palmer to be like, well, he might be the replacement, instead of trying to, like, build a more diverse receiving group, which hopefully, happens this year. We'll see what happens in terms of, like, first round pick, second round pick, or whatever. But, instead of just trying to find, like, a replacement for these guys, go and find somebody that can, take pressure off of them, and also probably the rest of your offense as a whole.
What, Jason Moore wasn't doing it for you? All respect to Jason Moore.
All respect to Jason Moore, who's in the NFL, and we are not. But it's like, you don't have to find like these 1-for-1 backups. Like, you can do different kind of skill players, and I like, if you're trying to treat a receiving core like a basketball team, like, you should have 5 different types of receivers, as opposed to, like, here's Mike Williams, here's backup Mike Williams, here's Keenan, here's backup Keenan, here's DeAndre Carter, here's backup DeAndre Carter. It's like, no, you can build this in a different way. And people are kind of talking about, like, what does this receiver room need? And obviously they never really replaced Jalen Guyton. Like, they need that kind of player. But they do need somebody who can work the field horizontally as well. And I think that's another way that teams like the Chiefs are able to put stress on defenses, is because they have somebody like Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and they also have Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, these guys who can do all the horizontal stuff. And then obviously Travis Kelce helps a lot of things, but they emphasize like vertical and then horizontal. It's not so much like intermediate precision route running. It is a lot of speed, it is a lot of yak, and not to say that's the only way to build things, but it is certainly something that lacks with the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, and then you can just call more things. You can do more things. It's kind of a no dub. But like, if for whatever reason this particular defense does this and they're weak against that, that's what you focus on that day. Like you said, instead of looking for backup DeAndre Carter.
And I do think that's right. I do think that's going to be, something that improves under Kellen Moore. And I think that's one of the reasons why Chargers fans should be really excited. Like, I know that there's been a lot of negativity, and I understand that, but the offense should be a lot better just based off of health and off of the coaching staff that's coming back this time around. So I do think we'll naturally see the offense improve if they just do nothing else right now. Obviously, I hope they go out and be proactive and add more talent, but if they just do nothing on offense, I do think it'll be better next year than it was this past season.
Yes, definitely. I don't think it's, I mean, again, barring health, of course, but if like Justin Herbert said himself, it took like 6-7 weeks for that rib to even feel kind of normal. Yeah. So if you're not having 6-7 weeks of fractured rib cartilage for quarterback, you're naturally going to be better. And you saw post that timeline, like right from like after the Falcons game on, that was the best football Justin Herbert played after like week 2 or so. So yeah, obviously the offense is going to get better almost by default.
Yeah. What do you make of the idea of, I tweeted this out earlier. It's just kind of curious to get your thoughts. Trading out of the first round completely and doing kind of what the Patriots did to us back in 2020 to get that Kenneth Murray trade. We ended up trading obviously the second and third round picks that year for the Patriots to move back from the first rounds. The Patriots that year had 2 seconds, 2 third round picks because of us. What would you think about an idea like that I don't think, Telesco's never traded back in his career, right? But what would you make, this class in particular? I think this is kind of one where you definitely want to trade back, but I think if you trade out of the first round completely, I think you could see some things open up in terms of depth, because then you're talking about, you get 4 picks in that like 40 to 100 window, as opposed to just the 2, which I think is pretty valuable in a class like this.
Yeah, I'm all about it. I don't know. Again, I have 15 guys on my big board, so I could not tell you what 1 through 100 looks like. But, if you trade back, there are some guys that at 21, and maybe it's like a bit of a reach, but it's not a huge deal to me. But if you can trade back a little bit and find kind of a sweet spot, like last year, I felt like if you traded back, you could find a wide receiver, edge rusher sweet spot, even in the second round. So doing that, I don't know who would be in the second round, probably like a Keon White or something, if that's a Chargers wanted to go with, just because of his age. And I haven't watched McDonald yet, but if this edge rusher group is as good as it is and as deep as it is, which it kind of seems like it is, I haven't watched Anderson yet, so apparently he's good or something, but
he's really good.
So I haven't watched all these guys yet, but it sounds like there's a really good spot there. So if you want edge rusher, or if you think the receiver class, if guys, or even maybe in the tight ends, there's a lot of guys you like between 21 and 40. Yeah, trade back, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. LD Bruin points out too, he would love this idea of trading out of the first round completely if it wasn't Tom Telesco. I also think that's why you do trade back though, because you want him to have more chances as opposed to fewer. Because in 2020 or in 2021, when he did have 2 second round picks, he got Josh Palmer. Like, he got 1 right.
Sweet.
That's the bar.
2 right would be great. 2, just 2 guys. Even in the second round, like, what is he, 50-50 on second round picks at this point?
Yeah, his second round pick hit rate is pretty good. Yeah,
they stay in the league. Perriman's still in the league, Henry's still in the league, Moses is still in the league, Asante Samuel Jr. is a starter. Who did they pick last year? Oh, nobody. Khalil Mack. So, hey, Jeremiah Tauchu's still in the league, apparently.
Yeah.
So
reunion this year.
Hang around. Yeah. So I'm totally fine with that. Again, I don't know the draft board up and down, but I'm all for it.
Nasir Adderley was a second round pick.
Oh, okay. We won't talk about that one, but everybody else is doing great. Manti Te'o. Forget it. Yeah, never mind. All right, I said it was 50-50.
Hey, man, the second round is better than the third round for sure. Third round picks, we're talking about Keenan. So he hit a home run in his first third round pick, which is bonkers. And then it was Chris Watt. Was he the one who passed away? I think that.
No, that was
Turk.
Max Turk, yeah.
2015 third round pick was Craig Mager. Then Max Turk. Dan Feeney, who he was fine. He's a backup, I guess. Justin Jones was a good player, just couldn't ever stay healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Trey Pipkins, no 3rd round pick in 2020. Then Josh Palmer and McKitty, and then JT Woods. So his second best 3rd round pick might honestly be Trey Pipkins.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see about Palmer, but yeah.
Yeah, that's hilarious to me. Yeah,
good stuff.
Yeah, better on day 3 than he is in round 3. That doesn't make any sense to me. All right. So any other takeaways from the Chiefs and catching them in terms of, how that relates to the Chargers?
Just that I've kind of accepted the fact that the Chiefs maybe they do have a Hall of Fame head coach, and they may have a quarterback who goes down as the greatest quarterback that we've ever seen, and maybe the most successful quarterback. I don't know about 7 Super Bowls, but I mean, what he's been doing is ridiculous. And so I accept the fact that that's in our division, and the Chargers will take a very long time to ever pass them for consistent success, which I know people didn't love for me to say on social media. It's very doom and gloom. What a bad attitude. But like, you watch what they just did. Like, this was supposed to be the Chargers all-in year. This is supposed to be the Chiefs rebuilding year. And instead, the Chargers blow a 27-0 lead, and the Chiefs are hosting Lombardi. And they just knocked their 2 draft classes out of the park. So, yeah, I'm hoping the Chargers can, catch them 1 year, a couple of years. But for consistent success, man, I just feel like watching that game, you just got to respect the fact that the Chiefs with Mahomes and with Reed, they're not a dynasty yet, but they could be. And I wouldn't be surprised if they were.
Yeah. The Chiefs also have like 13 picks this year. So
do they really?
Yep. Because they got a shit ton of comp picks for all the people leaving, previously. They have a decent amount of cap space, but like Orlando Brown is a free agent, stuff like that. So Juju is a free agent. So, they could easily free up. I think I saw one of the Chiefs writers say that they could free up to like have like $60 million in cap space.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they've got some work to do from the roster perspective this year. And then, when you get like 12 key players from your previous 2 draft classes, it makes a lot of things easier. So in terms of the Chiefs, like, I think obviously we wish that this were not the case, but I think unquestionably this is the best 5-year start to a career that we've ever seen. I mean, you're talking about a quarterback and coach who's hosted 5 straight AFC championship games. They've been in the Super Bowl 3 times. They've won 2 MVPs for Patrick Mahomes, 2 Super Bowl MVPs for Patrick Mahomes. So I don't know. Like, I caught some heat the other day when I said that Mahomes was like the best quarterback I've ever watched play in person. I think that generally is true. Like, I think in terms of like playing the position, I think that he's the best one that I've seen. And, obviously I respect what Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and all these guys have done. But in terms of just like handling the position, I think Mahomes is the best one. At the very least, he's the best comeback quarterback I've ever seen. Like, no lead is ever safe with Patrick Mahomes. He's able to just flip a switch in the 3rd quarter, 4th quarter, and be able to just come back and win these games. It's insane to me. Like, all of us who have watched the Chiefs and Chargers play over the last 4 or 5 years, we all knew what was happening in that second half. Like, everybody was like, everybody online was like, "Oh, the Eagles got this. This is in the bag." And it's like, have you watched the Chiefs? We're not too sure about that.
Yeah.
So it sucks. Like, I hate having that in the division. But at the end of the day, it's on the Chargers to figure out how to do it. Like, they've got to be able to build around Justin Herbert, maximize his ability, because I do believe that they have a guy who can go toe-to-toe with Mahomes at any minute, at any point. It's just, you got to get things right around him, and hopefully, Kellen Moore and Doug Nussmeier are kind of a step in the right direction there.
Yeah, the Kellen Moore, Nussmeier hires have really helped, like, just buoy up a little bit of my optimism for the next year,
100%.
Next few years, but definitely this year. If it were some first-year guy who was an assistant, the year before, I just couldn't talk myself into believing in the Chargers a whole lot this year outside of just the talent and the guys that they have. But with someone like Kellen Moore, I do feel a lot more positive.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so we're going to transition here. We're going to take some stock of where the Chargers' past 2 draft classes are at. This is essentially going to, leapfrog us into our our coverage of this upcoming draft. We'll have
Mhm.
our tight end ranking show this weekend. So excited to dive in there. But definitely want to kind of see where the Chargers young players are at and have a conversation about the 2021 class as well as the 2022 class and figure out, where these players are at, where they need to go, and have, an evaluation conversation about each of them.
Mhm.
So yes, we have a slideshow. Shout out to our friends at the Chargers Wire, who we've been, collaborating with. They make a great graphic here. So in terms of the 2021 class, obviously we'll run through the list really quickly. Rashawn Slater in the first round, Asante Samuel Jr., Josh Palmer, Trey McKitty, who we talked about earlier, Chris Rumpf in the fourth round, Brendan Hymus in the fifth round, and then Nick Neiman, Larry Roundtree in the sixth round, and then they rounded it out with Mark Webb. So I do think that the return of Rashawn Slater has kind of gone under the radar a little bit. I still see a lot of, mock drafts where the people have the Chargers taking an offensive tackle, and it's like part of that is because of Trey. They don't know about Trey Pipkins, obviously, but Rashawn Slater coming back next year is a huge story that nobody's really talking about. I think the fact that he was able to come back from his bicep injury and at least have a chance to play at the end really says a lot about where he's at. So he theoretically should have a whole offseason, normal offseason, being fully healthy and, getting back to his usual, all pro level left tackle self in 2023.
Yeah. The great part is there's no, to our knowledge, no lower body injuries. It was just the bicep. I kind of love that he did heal as fast that he did. Just some guys that had that freakish return to action, timeline. Rashawn Slater doing that and be able to gut it out like he was, like, says a lot about him and what he does. And like, you could have taken the season off, and really same with Joey Bosa. Like, the season could have been over for him, but he tried to make his way back, and the Chargers just couldn't get it up long enough to stick it to the divisional round. But yeah, Rashawn Slater coming back. The Chargers don't have a lot of guys that are, pretty consensusly top 3, top 4 at their position. And Rashawn Slater, when he comes back, is one of them. And I have no questions or worries about his return to form because I know who he trains with. We've seen him before. You just feel really good about him. This is a fantastic pick, of course.
Yeah, and I remember just being like so excited. I looked at the whole offseason and I was like, there's no way this guy's falling to the Chargers. Like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
We were talking about Christian Darrisaw and all that stuff, and Christian Darrisaw is a good player, but Rashawn Slater coming back is another thing that I think will, by nature of his return, the offense will improve just because of him. So very excited to see what that looks like. Obviously the Chargers will have a decision after next season in terms of that contract extension. So lots of people talking about Justin Herbert's contract extension, and rightfully so, but they are going to have to start preparing for Rashawn's extension after next season, which again would be a no-brainer in my opinion at that point.
Yep, no-brainer.
So Asante Samuel Jr. into the next one here. Very curious to see what happens with Asante Samuel Jr. this year. And we'll talk a little bit about Joshua Taylor with the next year's class. But, the way that the season ended for Asante was very up and down. Like, I think everybody loves Asante, what he brings to the table as a cover corner. Incredible ball skills, incredible recognition in terms of route coverages and matching them. But the Chargers actively told us that they don't think he can play the run. And, next year, presumably they're not going to have Bryce Callahan coming back. Mm-hmm. So Asante Samuel Jr., I think, was a very good pick. I think he's a high quality second cornerback in the league. But if he kind of takes on that role that he did at the end of the season, where he's the third corner, essentially, I am curious to see how that pans out and how Chargers social media, Chargers the fans, take that if Asante is playing, a secondary role as opposed to a starter role.
This is, I don't even know how to begin to talk about this corner room because of the injury, because of him being, not benched, but like mini bench during games on early downs, with Michael Davis being far better than we ever expected him to be. It's so difficult to talk about the outside corner position. And then you talk about slot corner, but then you have, one guy who's clearly a great slot corner, but he probably has to go. And you'll talk about that in a bit. You have Jaw Taylor, someone who can come in and take that role. So do you want to let him do that? But then where do you put Asante Samuel Jr.? How long do we have Michael Davis and Asante Samuel Jr. as the outside starters? When JC comes back, What are you doing? If Asante Samuel Jr. is, quote unquote benched because he's the corner 3, because Michael Davis is their best corner, and they've said that, they've shown us that, and JC's the guy that they paid. Are you trading Asante Samuel Jr.? Do you just leave him on the bench? Is it like you just happen to have a fantastic corner sitting on the bench? I don't know. His development has been really, really solid. I think the stuff against the run, I haven't like severely been displeased by his work against the run. So I maybe have to watch more. I never saw anything that was like, wow, you really got to pull this starting corner off the field because he can't play the run. I just feel like you're setting yourself up to be attacked when you do switch out corners. But the development's been really, really good. And I'm very curious to see what they do, because he was the automatic starter in camp.
Yeah.
And then he took a back seat because they let Michael Davis be the starter for like the second half or the last third of camp. And Davis looked really, really good in the preseason. And then Davis was benched and Asante Samuel Jr. got to start. And then I really don't know. It's such a complicated thing, because look what he did against the Jaguars. Like, you want that on the field. How do you take that off the field? Even if there's some issues against the run, of course, you leave him on the field because you find some ways to get the other 10 guys to help him, if that's the case, because he's that good of a corner, a coverage corner. I don't know. This one's very, very fascinating to me. I'm happy with his development. This has been a great pick, but we'll see, because he might not even start next year.
Yeah, I think in terms of his development, right? Like, I think if you really go back and isolate the games where he didn't really play super well down the stretch, it was the games where it was like he was not a starter. Like, he was the one who was kind of being pulled off the field, whether it was Denver or, previous games like that. But you watch a game where the Chargers are playing exclusively nickel, against the Colts, against the Jaguars, he is being so much more aggressive against the pass and against the run. And I think Asante can become a good run defender. It's just that he, if he misses, they're kind of screwed. Like, I don't think he's a last line of defense kind of player, but I think he can, stick his nose in there and play the run really well. But I mean, you look at his coverage grade, his forcing completions. Obviously, he had the 5 interceptions on in total, 3 in the last game. But from a coverage standpoint, like, he was playing like a top 20, top 15 corner in the league. And I think you take that, right? It's just the role here is the interesting thing that we're talking about.
Yeah, definitely.
So another one, Josh Palmer. You and I were in on Josh Palmer taking a big step, and he took a good step forward. I think you look at his score on ESPN. I think he ended up being like, I think it was 38th. I said on Twitter in terms of like his open score and catch rate. So he did develop, like, he did take a step forward. It's just that they were asking him to be wide receiver 1 for half of the season, and that's not really an ideal situation, especially when you don't really have anything behind him. So what do you make about where Josh Palmer's at? Where do you think he can go this year, with another year of development, another year of working with Justin, another year ideally being with Keenan, and we'll see what kind of happens with the rest of the room.
I really do think that just we know what we want. We know what the fans would want. They want the speed guy in round 1 or round 2 or something. But I really feel like we're just headed for a world where the same wide receiver 3s are the same wide receiver 3s. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's more about then building out wide receiver 4 and 5 with some of those complementary speed threats. As far as Josh Palmer's development, I mean, listen, there's only 8 guys the last 2 classes who had more yards than him this past season. Granted, a lot of that's opportunity, and I don't think his per play stats are super great, but the open score is pretty solid. And, Joe Lombardi's offense wasn't exactly one that was, getting him wild open. But if you look at where he played against the Chiefs, where he was that wide receiver, like 1B-ish, because Mike Williams went out. Keenan, you weren't sure how he was going to hold up. I mean, he had a fantastic game, and it was a slant, it was an over, it was a post, it was a corner. Like, he had working against the Falcons. You saw it sort of against the 49ers. You saw it against the Chiefs. Like, he can do a lot for the offense. So I think with an even better coordinator and a third year, he'll be really, really good. I really feel like they're just going to make him wide receiver 3 again. Maybe it's a 3A, 3B sort of thing. But going into last year, he was their wide receiver 3 by default. No competition. And there was no competition for even like a 3B option. It was literally just the 3 guys. And they didn't even consider putting someone like DeAndre Carter onto the field until Keenan got hurt. So if you believe in guys upstairs having more, power and say and sway and how things go, I really think Josh Palmer's wide receiver 3, and the Chargers go find themselves a speed guy in like round 4 or something.
That's not going to make people very happy.
No, but I mean, tell me Telesco wouldn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, from the receiver standpoint, like it was clear immediately that it wasn't a wide receiver 3 battle. It was a wide receiver 4 battle. And then obviously DeAndre Carter won that battle over Jalen Guyton. So I agree. I think Josh Palmer is going to be the wide receiver 3 again. Again, like I think also in terms of draft strategy, like people keep asking me like, oh, like they should take Jordan Addison. They should take, Smith Njigba. Oh my gosh, I got it. Njigba. There we go. They should take, Parker Washington from Penn State. It's like, they're not going to draft another slot receiver. They already have Keenan who plays in the slot. They already have Josh Palmer who plays in the slot. Like they're not going to be doing that kind of route. Like you really need to be focusing in on somebody who can play as a backside Z and threaten the field vertically. Like you need to replace Jalen Guyton. You don't need another slot receiver to, crowd that room. So in terms of where Josh Palmer stacks up in the class, from 2021 in the 2022 season, the only receivers from the class who had more yards than him were Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, and Jalen Waddle. 4 guys who I think are arguably, each top 10 receivers at this point. You look at where he stands in terms of like yards per route run. He's a little bit lower. He's let me filter this without tight ends. In terms of the receivers, he was 8th in the class, only behind Terrace Marshall, Nico Collins, Jamar Chase, Smith, St. Brown, and Jalen Waddle. So his per play stats aren't necessarily great, but, taking him in the 3rd round and like having him be the 5th or 6th best receiver in the class, I think you take that like from a 3rd round pick. And
definitely,
I think you can be a little frustrated by the situation that happened this season where he didn't necessarily take advantage and establish himself as somebody saying like, hey, I can be a number 1 or a number 2. But in terms of him being a number 3, I think he's a really solid number 3 option in this league. And again, like from a value standpoint, you take a receiver in the 3rd round who's giving you, wide receiver 5, 6, 7. I think you take that absolutely, going forward.
Yeah, I mean, you could look at some other guys. I mean, not that it's all the same because of different situations, but like Sky Moore had 250 yards. Kadarius Toney had 171. Was De'Ami Brown a 3rd round pick before Palmer at 143 yards? Again, very different situations. I mean, Jameson Williams at 41 yards. Different situation, of course, but I'll take it. 9th out of the last 2 classes this year in receiving yards isn't too bad. Although he did get the 98 targets.
Yeah, I mean, we all loved Elijah Moore, and I think he's has a very different situation in New York, but he had 446 yards this year. Rondo Moore was drafted in the 2nd round, and again, he got injured, I believe, but 414 yards from him. So, Josh Palmer's not necessarily a great player, but as a solid number 3, I think you can take that. Again, the Chargers need more players like Josh Palmer. Like they need more solid role players than people are kind of letting on. So, Trey McKinney, man, and Chris Rumph, I think you can kind of loop in the same conversation, and Brendan Hymas for that matter.
Yeah.
3 guys who I think at least we were semi-excited about 2 of them and just have not really panned out at all. I mean, Brendan Hymas is, kind of trying to find a way of maybe he's a center, maybe he's a guard. They don't really know.
Yeah.
It's clear right away that Jamari Sawyer was going to surpass him in training camp and obviously ended up starting at left tackle. Chris Rumph, like I it's kind of a butterfly thing, but Kyle Van Noy ended up being super important pass rusher, but that's out of necessity because Chris Rumph hasn't taken that step forward yet. And pass rushers typically develop slower than some other positions, and then Trey McKinney unfortunately took a pretty big step back this past season. But these 3 guys, man, they need one of them to like become a serviceable backup at least. And that has really not been the case.
Yeah. This range, again, the Chargers have found some pretty solid, back end late round guys. And we'll talk about it definitely in the last class, but yeah, this middle group really just did not do them any favors this year. Brendan Hyman, but like I didn't expect that to be an issue as much either. Not that I said Chris Rumph was edge 2. We wanted the Chargers to get an edge rusher, and we wanted the Chargers to take another offensive lineman. But I didn't really expect McKitty to take that step backwards. I think he found some better moments later on, but he was like, maybe it's a scheme thing. And, that's certainly part of the marriage of the run and the pass and improving the blocking schemes and all that. Maybe it really just did come down to scheme and bad coaching or something. But McKitty took a pretty big step back. And again, we're looking at drafting another tight end in round 1 as a possibility because he didn't take any step forward. Third round pick, your compensatory pick. Not that I expected him to be all world, but
That's right.
When he was a guy that was, blocking the shit out of Cam Hayward on the goal line against Pittsburgh. Like you saw some fantastic stuff from him when he started to play. And then this year just kind of all went backwards. Hymas is really confusing because, by all accounts, a good player. I think Brendan Thorne compared him to like Joe Tooney at one point. I think he had like a 2nd round grade on him. I didn't watch him, but the numbers looked good. He was a healthy player, a long-time starter. In the preseason last year, he looked good. I don't remember how much action he got during games last season, if at all. But, and then again, kind of like Trey McKitty, like you feel really good about this. Like, great, that's great offensive line depth. And then he gets beat up by Jamari Salyer, which is fine. In the preseason, he looked, solid. But watching him in camp and then watching him in games, I mean, he filled in for Zion, I believe, for like 8 reps or 7 reps against the Raiders and allowed like 4 pressures.
Yeah.
It was a real Storm Norton kind of performance there. So not great. So I think, and then Chris Rumph, I feel like this is it. Like this is the year you have to make the jump. Granted, of course, you do have another one, but leading the league in missed tackle rate and being the worst run stop rate in the league, while you're just not like that dynamic of a pass rusher yet, it's rough. So the Chargers, they can't trust him to be edge 3 this year. I don't think they should. If someone gets hurt and he has to be edge 3, edge 2, fine. And he might do really, really well. But that's a results thing. The process, like last year, I need him to find another guy. If it's Kyle Van Noy coming back, if it's a 2nd round, another 3rd round edge player or something, go for it. So overall, those 3 guys, really like this 2022 class, that the middle of the class is just lacking right now. And they really needed to have a bit more out of these guys.
Yeah, and I think like it's certainly possible that we see a year 3 leap from these guys, but Trey McKitty, I don't really think he fits what Kellen Moore wants from a tight end perspective because he's a non-threat as a receiver, like which is weird because that's what I felt best about him as a prospect was his ability to come in and make an impact as a pass catcher. But his ability as a blocker has to improve. And I think he was playing at a decent level down the stretch, but they need one of these guys to come in and have a great offseason. And we've seen it happen in other ways. The Chargers should certainly not bank on that happening like they did this past year. They're going to have to fortify the depth, but we'll see what happens there. Don't really want to spend a whole lot of time on Larry Roundtree and Mark Webb. Those are both kind of practice squad players at this point. The interesting ones, I'm going to bring in Eamon Ogbongbemiga in here as well. Is Nick Niemann. The 2 guys who were, Ryan Ficken guys, big special team players. Nick Niemann, I think, led the league in special teams tackles or was leading the AFC or something like that as a rookie. Now the Chargers are kind of in this transition where they might not have Drew Tranquil. Kenneth Murray might get the Jerry Tillery treatment. What do you make of Nick Niemann and Eamon Ogbongbemiga this year? Do you think they could be viable starters heading into 2023?
Oh boy. If they're going to pick one guy, it's Eamon. And I really don't know. We haven't seen them do much. Like, not that I wanted guys to get hurt. The linebackers were really freaking healthy last year. And so we barely saw Troy Reader, let alone Nick Niemann and Eamon Ogbongbemiga. So do I think either of them could be starters? In theory, they could start. That doesn't mean they have starting quality kind of play. I think they're just special teamers. I think that they might play some significant snaps this year. And I'd be happy to see them do that. Nick Niemann hasn't shown that he's a bad linebacker in any spots that he's been in. So I think you get a Kenneth Murray, Troy Reader kind of starting duo with Nick Niemann, Eamon Ogbongbemiga backing him up.
Yeah, I think in terms of replacing Tranquil, I think that would definitely be Eamon if they don't do anything else. Amon's more of a Mike linebacker, and Nick Neiman's definitely more of a weak side linebacker like Kenneth Murray is. So Amon would definitely be the starter. And we heard last offseason, that they really liked him. And then they ended up going out and signing Troy Reader and Cal Van Noy, and he didn't really get any reps. So going to be interesting to see when that one goes. But yeah, at the very least, they have Nick Niemann as a valuable special teams player. And I think in a 6th-round pick, we'd like to see more, but at least he's that. At least there's something there.
Yeah.
All right. Before we move on to the 2022 class, had a couple super chats that I wanted to address. One was up higher. I know there's the one recently about Eckler. Oh, Solo Man. Appreciate Solo Man always tuning in. He says, hope we can find a gem at edge in the 5th or 6th round, like the Lions got James Houston. He was very slept on through this draft process. He was. I didn't watch him. I think he was like a Jackson State edge rusher, if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, the guy ended up getting like 8 sacks or something like that in the last 6 games of the season. So, but this is exactly why, like leading up to the Super Bowl, we talked about, you never know when this dart throw is going to hit at these premium positions. So I think that's something that should be addressed, right? Like you take a pass rusher, a receiver in every single class, and then you never know what can come through. Maybe you get a James Houston every other year or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if they take a receiver or edge rusher rounds 1 or 2, go ahead and do the same thing in 6 or 7 or whatever. There's no reason to go get a fullback this year. So hopefully we don't do that this year.
And if you have extra 7th-round picks, don't trade them for nothing. And then Christian Hernandez says that he thinks they should trade Eckler for a 2nd-round pick and then draft Bijan and a wide receiver. So theoretically, trading Austin Eckler, he is kind of a prime trade candidate if you want to have one. It would free up a good amount of cap space for the Chargers. But I like this whole idea of trading good players to go draft people, I think is not where the Chargers are at. And, people are having this conversation about Eckler, about Keenan, about Joey, about Khalil, Sebastian Joseph Day. I've seen people talk about trading him. It's like, we all want the Chargers to catch the Chiefs. Like that's what we're talking about today.
Right.
And then people want to trade these good players. And I think Bijan's a fantastic prospect, but what if he had too much wear and tear at Texas? What if he gets injured? What if he does all these things and then you trade Austin Eckler for nothing and you're rolling with Joshua Kelly and Isaiah Spiller for the final year of Justin Herbert's contract window? So there's just all these layers to it. Like, sure, theoretically, Austin Eckler is a decent trade candidate, but he's still a really good football player. Like, I don't think you get better by trading Austin Eckler.
No, you don't. And they didn't find enough out of Kelly, or didn't find enough about Spiller to say, okay, we're ready for the succession. It's time to move on, or I guess in 2024. Can't say a whole lot more than that. But if Bijan makes it to 21, it's because he hit someone in college, or respectfully, I don't think he's going to make it to 21. So if he made it to 21, something happened. So again, I know Najee Harris made it to 24, but it's not like this is a big blue chip kind of draft class overall. And Bijan is, I think he was 6th and Dane Brugler's big board or something. So yeah, these guys aren't lasting to 21 unless he has some severe issue.
Yeah, Bijan's he's a consistently top 10 player in big board rankings. It's just the positional value thing that people want to talk about. But once you get past a certain point in the top 8, I think you should consider taking Bijan if you're, if you're 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th or whatever. I think Bijan is absolutely worth, a top 15 selection at this point.
Yeah.
All right, we'll get to the next slide here. We'll pick it up a little bit. I was not expecting a conversation that long, but obviously the Chargers getting Zion Johnson this past year. For whatever reason, still somebody that gets way too much hate online. For me, I got a lot of flack the other day because I said Zion is a better player right now than Asante Samuel Jr. And people are like, "What? That shit's crazy." And I'm like,
"Ooh, that's fun."
I got to think about that conversation. But I think Zion, he was the best run blocker on a team that featured an all-pro level center. and I think he was the focal point of their passing schemes up front. So I think Zion's going to be a great guard in this league, and I'm really excited to see what happens this year, presumably with more health around him, presumably, a second year leap for him. And I think he's going to be a really fantastic guard in this year. And people tend to forget that guard is a really difficult, transition for a lot of guys to make. I mean, you go from, Zion had a matchup advantage every single week at Boston College, every week.
Mhm.
And in the NFL, he's going up against Jeffrey Simmons one week and Chris Jones the next week and Grady Jarrett the next week after that. So, for him to play as well as he did, I think is an underrated storyline. And I think that Zion's going to be a really good player going forward.
Yeah, it was so unfortunate that there was a stretch where there was just always the one bad play or something, because watching Zion, like if you watch 70 plays of him, holy cow, like it's the best guard play I've seen overall for a Chargers player. Not that it's always saying a lot, but like I haven't seen really great guard play from the Chargers in quite some time. And not just that, but advanced guard play. Like Matt Filer was probably better, like solid, overall last season than maybe Zion was this year. But Zion was asked to do
fewer mistakes for sure.
So much for this team. And he had to learn, again, flipping from left guard to right guard, which is already tough enough to, I can't wipe my ass with my left hand, let alone block Chris Jones. So, he was doing, thank you. He was, now I have to go try it later. I'll send a video.
Let us know how that goes, man.
Our first YouTube short. Okay. God. I believe in Zion. He does great work. I love watching him play. And he was in a system where the coordinator decided, let's just keep dropping back, straight drop back with a hurt quarterback against Buckner and Jones again, and the Jones in Denver and all these guys. Like he was playing, he was swinging with a bat with all the donuts on it. Now he gets to take the donuts off and just swing. I think he's going to be a fantastic guard. I think he's like a Pro Bowl, all-pro caliber kind of player if he takes that next leap and has just stability around him, better coordinator, maybe better running game, guys that are healthy on either side of him. Should take a really nice leap next year.
Yeah, with the added emphasis on the run game, I think that's really going to benefit Zion. Watching the way that the Cowboys would pull their guards made me really excited for Zion to see what he was able to do, because
it makes me happy.
With the Chargers, it was like one or two times a game where they would do like a cool counter concept or a trap concept. But, that's something that I think Kellen Moore has in his bag, is the ability to have a lot of misdirection in the run game and be able to get somebody like Zion and Rashawn Slater out on the move, which I think he's going to have a lot of fun with. All right. You mentioned the middle of the classes, JT Woods, Isaiah Spiller, big question marks for the Chargers going forward. The Chargers don't really have a lot of flexibility to go out and get a safety upgrade. John Johnson, who used to play first daily with the Rams, is probably going to get cut by the Browns. But I don't think the Chargers are going to be able to have the cap space to go out and sign a quality veteran safety. Maybe they can kind of, get a vet minimum kind of signing. But this is a very important season. Like I hesitate to call it a make or break off season for JT Woods, but it kind of feels like that, because if he's not able to get on the starting field this year, or at least play as a safety 3, like play, 20, 30 snaps a game, then I think we're going to be in for a tough conversation for JT after the season.
Yeah, the thing with JT Woods, if you told me that they were going to redshirt him, they had Nasir Adderley, in theory, I thought they would have felt better about Mark Webb. If you told me Alohi Gilman was playing way better and they redshirted him, I'd say, I get it. And you're preparing for Nasir Adderley's departure. All good. The real huge red flag concern is that it's not that he didn't play defense, it's that he didn't even play special teams. And not that everyone has to go play special teams and be great at it, but like he was replaced. And again, it's not like he was replaced by another veteran who just, they've always had this safety playing really, really well. No, it was Raheem Lane, an undrafted free agent safety who came in, and, Ficken's like, no, I don't want Spiller on the field, or excuse me, Woods, but yes, Spiller as well. It was very, very concerning to see that. And this is kind of what we always worry about with the third round picks, is it's always a high upside project sort of guy. And that's great if you have 4 years to wait for someone like Trey Pipkins, or I guess 3.5. JT Woods, I just think if he does not take that step forward this year, and it's clearly like we're not a whole lot further along than we were the previous year, he's replaced in 2024. Like you go probably draft someone really high or sign a veteran or something. And it really wouldn't surprise me if he were already kind of replaced this year, because I feel like relative to their expectations for him, he's been pretty disappointing. And I don't recall how long they've held on to third round picks previously, but it's not like Chris Watt and Craig Mager were like there through their entire contracts as third round picks. Like those guys, once they realized that they just were not cutting it in the league, they were cut. And I think JT Woods, it really does come down to this season for him.
Yeah, and I think that they're going to head into the season with Alohi Gilman as a starter. I think that's a safe thing to say at this point. And I think Alohi has earned that right. I think Alohi has earned the right to at least be a safety 3 and play significant snaps. But JT's got to take a big leap forward this year. And same with Isaiah Spiller. Both of these guys, I think, obviously Isaiah was drafted as the youngest player in his class. He plays running back, so it's not like he, is a super premium pick or anything like that. But we see a ton of, day 2, day 3 running backs, get cut like immediately. I mean, like the 49ers drafted Trey Sermon in the 3rd round, and he didn't even make it out of camp, man. Like he got replaced by Elijah Mitchell, and then this year they drafted another back who replaced him. So I'm not as concerned about Isaiah Spiller as I am JT Woods, I think, because I do think that Isaiah Spiller at least showed some good flashes this year. And I think that he is closer to being like a quality backup player. The thing for him was that they didn't trust him on special teams. They didn't trust him as a pass protector, which I can understand. I think Larry Roundtree being the choice to replace him was a little frustrating. But I understand why they would go out and sign a Sony Michel and say, hey, we trust this veteran instead of Isaiah Spiller at that point. So not as concerned about Isaiah Spiller, but definitely as JT Woods. But I am a little concerned about Isaiah's, lack of development this year. And again, he didn't really have a great chance, right? But it's like you're talking about not being able to beat out Larry Roundtree for your RB3 spot, which I think is definitely at least, slightly concerning.
Yes, Spiller not beating out Roundtree for that spot. And then, although I think this is partially due to injuries, but he couldn't get on the field as a blocker on special teams over Michael Bandy. I mean, they went out and they decided that Michael Bandy, who is, I think, lighter and potentially smaller than I am, was the guy that should block on special. Now, the kickoff return wasn't all that great, so maybe that wasn't a good decision. Yeah. But, I mean, they said that Michael Bandy was the guy they wanted out there over someone like Isaiah Spiller, who was inactive. So, yeah, not great, but he's a case where you can wait. I do see good things. There was nothing I watched that was like, oh, he's like that's really concerning,
right?
Which is good. Like the 2.3 yards per carry is actually a bit of a surprise to me. I don't know if that was more situational or what, because my lasting memory of him was looking good in the preseason, but then he got hurt, and then he went to that against the Chiefs. He's putting guys in the dirt, had a big 10-yard gain up the middle where he's dragging dudes. I'm like, okay, great. And then it was just Larry Roundtree the rest of the way. So I don't have any like reason to say this is a bad pick. And it's a 4th round pick, so it's not as pressing. So I feel good about him moving forward, but we got to at least see he play some special teams.
Yeah, I think his ability as a receiver too should make him a bit of a safer look. But again, very important offseason for him because, there are people who want the Chargers to draft Bijan Robinson. If you draft Bijan Robinson, there's Isaiah Spiller is done. Like he's not on the Chargers at that point, basically. So, this is, if they pick another 3rd round running back, 4th round running back, Isaiah's got to come into training camp and show that he can be a true impact player over that player. So, arguably the strength of this draft class is Otito, Jamari, and Jasir Taylor. We'll talk about all 3 of them, but Jasir Taylor, I heard recently, I shared this in the Discord. The Chargers are going to head into this season expecting Jasir Taylor to be the starting nickel in place of Bryce Callahan. They'll see where Bryce Callahan's market goes. If he, is unable to sign with a team and he's still kind of waiting out there in June, July, I think they would bring him back. But I think they're going to head into this draft and this free agency cycle with Jasir Taylor expected to seize that role. And I think, he showed some really good things. I think if you watch that tape against the Dolphins, it was a really good game for him. There was also some up and down play, against the Broncos. So I think this team is excited about Jasir Taylor. And if he takes a big step forward, then you're talking about a much better class with Zion, Jamari, Jasir, and we'll see what happens with Otito's health. But Jossier Taylor becoming a starter and a good one would be huge for this class.
Yeah, that would be huge. I don't recall the last time a 6th round pick, I mean, outside of Jamari, but that was kind of out of necessity. But like, I don't recall a 6th round pick for the Chargers developing previously a special teamer and then becoming a starter that quickly. So, hey, that's great. Like, the strength of this class really was that 6th round. And of course, the 1st round was Zion. So, yeah, really happy about him. And I think that flexibility, I think he does look better at slot corner. I know they tried him outside. I think as a slot corner, he does look better. I think that works better. I think he's a better run defender there too. And if things don't work out, fine. You can then kind of pivot and find a role for Asante Samuel Jr. or someone else in the slot. I don't know how you make that work, but if for some reason things are really, really bad, I guess you could throw Asante Samuel Jr. in the slot, pull Jaw Taylor, and then find a way to have both Davis and JC on the field with ASJ.
One thing I'm curious about Ja this particular offseason is, do they maybe kind of cross train him a little bit to take some snaps at safety for when JC comes back? Because I think if they like him enough, they'll find a spot for him.
Yeah.
Maybe he gets, 10 snaps a game as that third safety, as opposed to that third corner and dime packages or something like that. And I think he does have that kind of flexibility and ability. So the team's excited about Jossier Taylor, and I think that should be, exciting for Chargers fans, especially because we've been talking about like how kind of underwhelming these draft classes has been. Yeah. But if you're able to go from just Zion and Jamari being quality starters to Zion, Jamari, and Jossier Taylor being quality starters, makes a huge difference. And we'll see what happens with Otito's health, and then obviously if JT Woods or Isaiah Spiller can figure it out, then you feel a lot better about this class overall.
Yeah, for what it's worth, Bryce Callahan had 58 box safety, I guess, snaps, and then 1 free safety snap last year. So 59 snaps overall in the season. So yeah, I'm sure a couple of reps has got to be out there as a safety too.
There you go. And then Dean Leonard kind of feels like this class's Nick Niemann, which is great. Like we didn't know how Dean was going to be at special teams, and he had a rough preseason with special teams, but man, did he come on strong, this season under Ryan Ficken's tutelage. So, if all Dean Leonard is a decent, corner 6 and a really great gunner, again, I think you take that for a 7th round pick, and the guy who like literally spent part of his college career in Canada.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think I was worried he wouldn't even make the roster. He did, and he showed why he had why he was drafted, why he could have a role on the team. Again, if it's only as a special teamer, I don't hate it, especially with Ficken.
Yeah, and then Xander's very curious. Not a ton of fullback love with Kellen Moore's offense. It was a lot more 6 offensive linemen, tight end, fullback reps, very similar to like a Steven Anderson. Like, speaking of, I think Kellen Moore would love Steven Anderson. I don't know if he wants to come back or not, but just throwing that out there now. So Xander as a fullback, I'm curious to see kind of what happens there, because I feel like there is some rushing versatility there that Joe Lombardi did not tap into at all. But I think somebody like Kellen Moore could find a bit more of a role for Xander as a weapon, as opposed to like just a traditional fullback.
Yeah, I really want to go at some point. Why would I watch this? I don't know. I guess I'm bored. The Cowboys, with Dak, I think Arjun said the last 2 or 3 years or whatever it was, their quarterback sneak conversion rate really wasn't that great. So I don't know why that was an issue. So if you need to back off a little bit, I don't know why it would be an issue with Justin Herbert. But if you want to find something for Xander Horvath, like there's some attempts there. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Horvath converted every 4th down rush that he had. I could be wrong, or like short.
I think he's missed like 1 or 2 in his career.
Okay, gotcha. It's a long career.
Yeah, very long career. But we'll see. I think the QB sneak's becoming a bit of a cheat code, and obviously the Eagles did that better than anybody this year.
Yeah.
All right. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that conversation. It went a little longer than I was expecting it. Tyler, what's the thing you're most excited about when talking about these 2 classes? What's kind of the thing you're focusing in on in the offseason?
Dude, Rashawn Slater moving in space, with Zion moving in space, with Corey Linsley moving in space. Jamari Sawyer doesn't move all that much, but watching the guys drafted with those elite RAS scores, like it's just different. You're watching guys like Trent Williams, like they can just freaking move. And now you get Rashawn Slater back, who's a freak athlete. Zion's an elite athlete. Like, I just can't wait to watch that be unlocked with this offense, I hope.
Yeah, hopefully, again, Kellen Moore, I think, is going to do a lot of great things for this offense, and Doug Nussmeier as well. I think that's a good one, man. I think this offensive line, if they bring back Trey Pipkins, can be a really quality group. Assuming second-year leaps from Zion and Jamari, health from Rashawn Slater. I'm excited to see that unit come together. Maybe they go get a cheap veteran or two. So exciting times. All right. That's going to do it for us today, guys. Appreciate everybody for tuning in live. Had some good conversations in the chat I saw. So we will be going live on Saturday for our tight ends ranking episode. And then it's full steam ahead. I think we're exactly a month away from free agency. I think we're like 2 weeks away from the combine. So this is really where the offseason really starts to pick up. So Tyler, appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy with all the Ed TPA. So good luck with all of that. And then as always, make sure and again, comment, like the video, subscribe, all that good stuff. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys on Saturday.